In the spring of 1960, a young boy named Timothy Cole wandered away from his mother during a visit to the quiet town of Merrow, Massachusetts. He was only 8, fascinated by birds, and had followed the chirping of a red cardinal down a gravel path near the edge of town. The trail ended at an old fence, where a once grand house sat crumbling behind rusted iron gates. Its windows, despite the decaying structure, were spotless, gleaming like mirrors. As Timothy approached, he thought he saw someone inside, an elderly woman standing by a second-floor window. Her face was familiar, though impossible. She looked exactly like his grandmother, Ruth, who had passed away 2 years earlier in another state. The reflection didn't wave. It only stared back at him, solemn, unmoving, and eerily real. When he returned to his mother and told her what he'd seen, she grew pale. Not because of the ghostly image, but because Timothy described Ruth wearing the same navy shawl she'd been buried in. If you love eerie, unraveling tales with hidden truths, hit subscribe now and join us on this journey into the forgotten corners of the past. Locals had long whispered about that place, Merrow House. Nestled on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, it had stood untouched for decades, avoided by townsfolk and left out of local history books. What made it infamous wasn't its imposing structure or tragic past, it was the windows. People said they reflected things that weren't there, not just ghosts, but moments, people long gone. Things that hadn't happened yet. For more than a century, stories had drifted in and out of public consciousness. A woman seeing her dead son smiling in the glass, a pastor claiming his reflection was replaced with someone else's, a maid who quit on the spot after catching sight of herself pregnant, though she'd never lain with anyone. Built in 1850 by a wealthy shipbuilder, Elijah Merrow, the house had once symbolized power and legacy, but soon after its completion, strange rumors began to swirl. Mirrors were removed, curtains were drawn at all hours. Some said Elijah had tried to have the windows replaced entirely, only to find the new panes behaved the same, or worse. By the 1900s, children in the area had given the house nicknames: the Looking House, Ghost Mirror Manor, the Whisper Place. Adults rolled their eyes, but few dared walk past it alone after dark. Not because of creaks or groans, but because of the strange feeling that someone was always watching from behind the glass. Merrow House didn't just reflect what stood before it. It reflected what shouldn't have been there at all. Over time, the town of Merrow quietly erased the estate from maps and property records. New generations forgot its exact location. Parents told children it was just a myth, a story to keep them from wandering into the woods. But the house never vanished. It simply waited. In 1959, a historical society attempted to document all surviving buildings from the 1800s. When they reached the cliffs near the shore, one member pointed to the structure and said, "That's not on our list." Another replied, "It never was." And yet, there it stood, as real as the waves crashing below. This is the beginning of a story that stretches over a century. One layered with grief, obsession, disappearances, and visions that defy explanation. A story not just about a house, but about what lies beneath its surface and the secrets forever trapped in glass. To understand the truth of Merrow House, we must return to its origin. Back to a time of oil lamps and wooden ships, when Elijah Merrow laid the first stone, unaware that he was not building a home, but a prison for something no one yet understood. And so, our journey begins. Elijah Merrow was not a man of superstition. Born in 1812 to a merchant family in Boston, he rose to prominence through grit and vision. By 38, he had built a fleet of commercial vessels and amassed enough wealth to rival old money dynasties. But he never sought society's approval. He longed for permanence, something that would outlast storms and stock markets, something to bear his name when he was gone. In 1850, he purchased a strip of land on the cliffs of Merrow, where the sea crashed relentlessly against jagged stone. Locals called the place Widow's Point, named for the many who watched loved ones disappear into the Atlantic from its rocky edge. Elijah found beauty in its desolation. It was a place untouched, where he could build a legacy in stone and glass. The Merrow House took 3 years to construct. Materials were imported from Europe: Italian marble, English brick, and custom-cut panes from a German glazier, who claimed his glass could hold light longer. Elijah spared no expense. He commissioned a house of symmetry and grandeur, 4 stories tall, with 22 rooms and windows in every direction. The crown jewel was a massive sea-facing bay window that stretched 2 stories high, meant to reflect the sunrise in full bloom each morning. He built it for his wife, Margaret. They had married late in life. He was 40, she 35, a widow with no children. Margaret was known for her gentleness, a woman who painted, played piano, and often fell into quiet reverie. She adored the sea, often standing at the bluff for hours, hair unpinned, humming to herself. Elijah, hardened by commerce, softened around her. But from the moment they moved into the house, something shifted. It began subtly. Margaret would pause mid-sentence, gaze into a mirror and frown. She said she saw someone behind her, a man in a dark coat. Not Elijah. He dismissed it, blamed exhaustion. Then came the sleepwalking. Elijah awoke one night to find her standing barefoot in front of the bay window, whispering, "It's not my face." Margaret's decline was swift. Within months, she stopped painting. She avoided mirrors, refused to look out the windows, and spoke of people walking through the glass. Physicians were called one after another. They found no cause. Melancholia, said one. Delirium, another. In late autumn of 1852, she was found dead in the parlor, a shattered teacup beside her. The official cause, heart failure. But those who prepared the body whispered that her face wore a look of awe, almost reverence, as if she'd seen something wondrous the moment before death. Elijah changed after that. He covered every mirror with cloth. The piano went untouched. He dismissed the servants, shut the house to visitors, and took to wandering the halls alone. Yet the windows remained uncovered, gleaming, immaculate, as if untouched by sea spray or dust. Some say he polished them daily. Others said he spoke to them. The townsfolk pitied him at first. Then they grew wary. Children were warned not to approach the estate. Carriages would quicken their pace near the gates. Rumors began, reflections that moved on their own, laughter behind closed shutters, shadows that lingered after twilight. But Elijah didn't leave. Instead, he expanded the library, filling it with books on optics, ancient rituals, even maritime superstitions. He wrote notes in the margins, diagrams, dates. He charted the tides, marked moon phases. And always he returned to the windows. In a letter to his sister dated January 1853, he wrote only one line, "Margaret is not gone. I see her still." By spring, Elijah ceased all correspondence. The house stood quiet, and no one dared approach. It was as if the sea itself had drawn a curtain around Merrow House, hiding whatever truth had taken root within its walls, and within its glass. After Margaret's death, the Merrow House grew silent. But silence in this place didn't mean peace. It meant pressure, like the air just before a thunderstorm. Elijah Merrow, once the proud master of ships and stone, became a ghost within his own walls. He no longer wrote letters. He no longer conducted business. Instead, he drifted from room to room, always ending in the eastern study where sunlight spilled through 3 tall windows. Servants who'd remained spoke of his strange behavior. He would stand before the glass for hours, watching something no one else could see. He talked to the windows in murmurs, as if coaxing answers from them. Some said he began polishing them obsessively, twice a day, using cloth soaked in salt water. His knuckles cracked from the friction, leaving faint streaks of blood on the panes. But he didn't stop. One maid, Anna Riggs, lasted only 2 weeks before fleeing. She claimed she caught her reflection smiling at her, while her own face remained frozen in fear. "It winked at me," she cried. "I didn't wink." It did. Word began to spread beyond Marlow. Travelers came seeking the mysterious house where windows betrayed the laws of nature. Some left disappointed, others left shaken, swearing they'd seen figures that didn't belong to them, images that responded before the person moved. Children dared one another to approach the fence and stare into the parlor windows. One boy fainted after claiming he saw his father, who had been lost at sea years before, tapping on the glass from the inside. But inside, Elijah descended further. He nailed shut the doors to Margaret's room, then tore down the curtains in every part of the house. The light poured in at all hours, reflecting and refracting in unnatural ways. Elijah began keeping journals filled with erratic observations. Margaret appeared again at 3:13, spoke my name, her mouth did not move. And later, there are more now, faces I do not know. Neighbors reported strange lights flickering at night, as if the windows held their own kind of lantern. Others said they heard humming, the same tune Margaret used to play on the piano, drifting from an otherwise empty parlor. By autumn of 1862, no one had seen Elijah outside for weeks. His chimney still smoked, his lamps still burned, but he never emerged. Then, during a late September storm, a bolt of lightning struck the bluff. The thunder shook the town awake. The next morning, a groundskeeper passing by noticed the front door ajar. Inside, the house was untouched, frozen in eerie stillness, but Elijah was gone. No body, no note, just his final journal entry left open on the desk. I have seen what lies beyond the glass, and it has seen me. On the window pane above his desk there was a single handprint, smaller than his, feminine. As if someone had reached out from the other side and pressed gently against the glass. Authorities searched for weeks. No sign of struggle, no trail leading away from the property. It was as if Elijah Merrow had simply stepped into the window and vanished. After his disappearance, the house passed to distant cousins, but none dared claim it. The windows remained uncovered, still gleaming. And the townsfolk, once curious, grew fearful. They stopped walking past after dusk. They lowered their eyes when speaking of it. Even in church, the name Merrow was spoken only in hushed tones. No one dared break the windows, not even the children. There was something sacred or dangerous about them, something untouchable. By the time winter arrived, people no longer asked where Elijah had gone. They asked what he had become. And when fog rolled in from the sea, some swore they saw a man's silhouette in the bay window, watching, waiting, his hand resting softly against the glass. After Elijah Merrow's disappearance, the house stood silent for nearly a decade. Its doors locked, windows unbroken, yet glistening as if someone still polished them daily. Ivy climbed the stone walls, but never crept across the glass. Even nature, it seemed, respected or feared those panes. In 1871, distant relatives of Elijah from the Chamberlain line inherited the estate. With little attachment to the Merrow name, they saw opportunity in the property. Joseph Chamberlain, a banker from Providence, hoped to renovate the estate and sell it. But it was his sister, Rebecca, who took true interest in the house. Rebecca was not typical for her time. A schoolteacher and amateur historian, she had a quiet strength and sharp intellect. Where others saw ruin, she saw mystery. Against her brother's advice, she moved into Merrow House in spring of 1872, intent on restoring it to its former glory. At first, things were quiet. She documented her experiences in detailed journals, some of which survive today. In her early entries, she notes the strange clarity of the windows, writing, "Even without sunlight, they shimmer faintly, like a surface waiting to be touched." She also described the way sound seemed to echo oddly in the house, especially near the eastern corridor. Then, in August of that year, Rebecca made her first alarming entry. "This morning, as I passed the drawing room, I caught sight of movement in the glass. I turned quickly. The room was empty. But the reflection remained for a heartbeat longer than it should have, as if someone lingered on the other side. By autumn, the sightings became more frequent. She began sketching faces she saw in the windows, not her own reflection but others, some old, some young, all strangers. Sometimes they stood still, other times they walked slowly past, eyes downcast, never interacting, never acknowledging her. Her brother dismissed the accounts, blaming loneliness and isolation. But then came the incident with Henry, Rebecca's younger brother, only 16. He'd come to visit for a weekend, bright, curious, and skeptical. On the second night, Rebecca found him standing before the parlor window, glassy-eyed and pale. He said he'd seen himself standing outside, drenched, calling to be let in. But when he blinked, the image was gone. That night, he sleepwalked. Rebecca woke to the front door wide open and Henry's footprints trailing into the mist toward the cliffs. His body was recovered in the river 2 days later. No injuries, no water in his lungs. The physician said his heart had simply stopped. After that, Rebecca never slept in the main bedroom again. She moved into a small servant's room at the back of the house, far from the front windows. Her journals turned darker. She spoke of dreams that bled into waking hours, of voices whispering from the glass when the wind blew. She wrote, "The windows do not show death. They remember it, relive it, and sometimes invite it back." By 1875, she boarded up all windows on the first floor, not to protect from break-ins, but to shield herself from what looked back. She continued teaching in town, but neighbors noticed the change in her. Her once vibrant spirit dulled. She became wary, reserved, as if always listening for something no one else could hear. One journal entry stands out. From December 1st, 1877. "I have seen a girl with red ribbons. She walks past the hall mirror every dusk. She is not me, but she mimics me." The girl, she claimed, began to appear in other rooms, always just in the reflection, always with those ribbons. In 1880, Rebecca stopped writing. Her last entry was short. "They know I'm watching." She left Merrow House in 1881 without explanation, moved to Rhode Island and never spoke of the estate again. But the townsfolk still tell stories of a woman with a lantern walking its halls at night, visible only through the windows. By the 1890s, Merrow House was no longer just a local curiosity. It had become legend. Travelers passing through Marlow would ask for directions with a mix of dread and intrigue. Though the estate remained shuttered, stories flourished, spreading through the region like ripples on dark water. Writers, drawn by whispers of its haunted nature, began to include Merrow House in serialized Gothic tales. Local newspapers ran features with headlines like, "The House That Reflects the Dead and Windows into the Beyond." Whether truth or fiction, the public couldn't get enough. And with each retelling, the legend grew. One story from 1891 gained particular attention. A farmer named Seth Holloway claimed that, while delivering wood to the back of the estate, he glimpsed a little boy in the window, dressed in strange, old-fashioned clothes. The boy looked terrified, mouthing something silently. Holloway ran to the door thinking someone was trapped inside. But the house was locked tight. When he looked again, the window was empty. That same year, a photographer named Agnes DuPont arrived from Boston, hoping to capture the house on glass plate negatives. She believed that what the eye couldn't see, the lens sometimes could. Her photo sessions spanned 3 days. On the second evening, she took a wide shot of the eastern wing at sunset. When she developed the image, she found something she hadn't seen while shooting. There in the second-floor window was a woman in a long dress, her hands pressed to the glass. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open, mid-scream. DuPont returned to the house the next morning. She tried to replicate the image, but the window remained empty. She published the photo in a small New England journal under the title Glass Prison. Over time, the image circulated, passed from hand to hand. No one ever identified the woman. The photo caught the attention of Edwin Larimore, a former seminary student turned paranormal investigator. In 1894, Larimore arrived in Marlow with notebooks, measuring tools, and a determination to explain the phenomenon scientifically. He stayed in the house for 3 nights, camping in the boarded-up library. In his published report, Reflections of the Unknown, he wrote, "At 2:15 a.m. I stood before the parlor window and clearly saw the face of my grandfather, dead 10 years, smiling at me. When I reached out, my hand passed through only cold glass." He documented cold spots, whispers he couldn't trace, and most chillingly, a moment where he saw his own reflection step back, before he had moved. He called the house a repository of emotional residue, collecting and repeating echoes of trauma. His work, controversial yet compelling, sparked debate in academic and spiritualist circles alike. Was Merrow House truly haunted, or were its windows a strange mirror into memory, time, or some unexplained energy? Tourists began arriving, some seeking thrills, others answers. Some knocked and left offerings, flowers, letters, even photographs of deceased loved ones. They said the house had a way of answering if it wanted to, yet not all encounters were benign. In 1897, a seamstress named Ethel Royce visited with her fiancé. She reportedly stood before the great bay window and grew silent. She said she saw herself in a wedding gown, blood running down her arms. That night, she returned alone and was never seen again. Only her gloves were found, folded neatly on the stone path near the eastern steps. The townspeople began warning visitors. The sheriff posted signs. But nothing stopped the curiosity. If anything, the house's reputation only deepened, feeding on attention like dry wood to flame. By the decade's end, Merrow House was no longer simply haunted. It was myth, a place where glass told stories the living weren't ready to hear, and the more people looked, the more they claimed the windows began looking back. By the turn of the century, Merrow House was no longer just a curiosity. It had become a destination. The 1900s ushered in a new kind of obsession as spiritualism surged across the country. Seances, ghost photography, and spectral communication were no longer taboo but fashionable, and Merrow House, with its century-long history of visual anomalies, became the holy grail for believers. They came in droves, mostly young people, many of them women, drawn by tales of seeing lost relatives or glimpses of their future in the glass. They would walk the grounds, picnic near the fences, and take turns daring each other to step closer to the windows. Some brought compact mirrors, hoping to catch a reflection within a reflection. Others pressed photographs of deceased loved ones against the panes, whispering names. The town of Marlow grew uneasy. Merchants profited from the influx, selling postcards and cheap trinkets branded reflections of Merrow. But long-time residents avoided the house entirely. Even those who once dismissed the legends began to lower their voices when speaking of it, because not all visitors left unchanged. In 1903, a 17-year-old girl named Lillian March disappeared after a weekend trip to the site with friends. They claimed she had stared too long into one of the east-facing windows, gone pale, and whispered, "I'm not alone." The next morning, she was gone. Her shoes were found outside the window. No footprints led away. Her disappearance became the catalyst for growing concern. But the real turning point came the following year. A girl named Clara Stowe, daughter of a local judge, was found wandering the road barefoot and disoriented. She had gone to Merrow House with friends for a dare, but had become separated. When found, she was muttering to herself, eyes wide with terror. She said the windows were breathing, her mother later told the newspaper, and that they were full of people who wanted to come out. Clara was never the same. She spent the rest of her life in a private care facility where nurses recorded episodes of her talking to empty mirrors, laughing, crying, whispering things no one could understand. It was during this period that Dr. Josiah Bell entered the picture. A respected psychiatrist from New Haven, with an interest in fringe psychological phenomena, Bell had read about the house in a spiritualist journal. But unlike the mediums and ghost chasers, he approached the legend through a scientific lens. He believed that the human mind could project unprocessed trauma into its environment, and that perhaps Merrow House was some kind of psychic echo chamber. In 1906, he published a short paper titled Glass as Memory, a theory of emotional projection. In it, he speculated that the particular type of glass used in Merrow House might retain emotional energy the way magnetic tape retains sound. His theory was mocked in academic circles, but captured the public's imagination. Tourists began referring to the estate as the house that remembers. Some started leaving written confessions near the windows, letters of loss, regret, apology, hoping the house would preserve them or forgive them. The legend evolved. It was no longer just about seeing the dead. It was about confronting oneself, memories, sins, unrealized futures. The windows had become more than supernatural. They had become mirrors of the soul. But Dr. Bell's theory carried a chilling implication. If the glass absorbed strong emotions, grief, rage, longing, what might happen if it collected too much? He wrote in a private letter, found decades later, "A vessel that gathers sorrow must eventually overflow. I fear Merrow House is no longer a house at all. It is becoming something else. And yet people kept coming, because for every story of fear there were others, of comfort, of connection. A woman claimed she saw her son again. A man said he watched his mother smile from a bedroom pane. To many, the risk was worth it. But the house was still watching, and it never blinked. By the 1910s, Merrow House had become too infamous to ignore and too feared to reclaim. Though still technically owned by the Chamberlain lineage, the estate remained abandoned until Lydia Bell arrived. Daughter of Dr. Josiah Bell, Lydia had grown up in the shadow of her father's theories. She studied his journals, read every account of Merrow House, and believed that something within the house had reached a critical threshold. Unlike her father, Lydia wasn't a scientist. She was a mystic. Quiet, intense, and deeply spiritual, she believed the house was not just remembering but hungering. In 1913, she made the unprecedented decision to move into Merrow House alone. Locals watched from a distance as she arrived, with only a trunk and a single black cat. Within weeks, rumors swirled. Some claimed she lit candles in every room at dusk. Others said they heard her singing in a language no one recognized. But what truly caught attention was what she did to the windows. She began sealing them one by one. Not with curtains or boards from the outside, but with thick, dark cloth nailed from within. She called it binding the eyes. When questioned by a wandering priest who dared knock on her door, Lydia told him, "They've seen too much. They want to show too much." In her diaries, discovered decades later, she wrote, "Each night I hear them breathe. The glass exhales fog, even when the air is still. And in that fog there are shapes. I cannot let them out. I must darken their gaze." Despite the coverings, strange phenomena continued. Neighbors reported the faint glow of candlelight, though the windows were covered in heavy fabric. On foggy mornings, outlines of hands appeared on the glass, pressed from the inside, fingers splayed wide. Then the dreams began. Lydia wrote of visions where she wandered the halls, only to find her own reflection waiting at the end of every corridor. Not in mirrors, but in the windows themselves. And the reflection would speak without sound, mouthing words she did not yet understand. Most disturbing were her entries from late 1914. "They've shown me things that haven't happened yet. My hands old and bloodied. My mouth stitched, a cradle rocking empty." That winter, Lydia fell ill. But it wasn't her body that betrayed her, it was her mind. Friends who visited said she grew forgetful, then paranoid, then violently erratic. She once accused a neighbor boy of being a reflection, trying to escape the glass. Another time, she was found weeping at the base of the grand staircase, clutching a window pane she had pried loose, whispering, "It sees what I'm becoming." She was eventually removed from the house under court order and placed in a sanatorium in upstate New York. She never recovered. The official story claimed exhaustion, stress, inherited mental instability. But her final words, scribbled into the corner of a notebook before her transfer, said something else. "The curse isn't the house. It's the invitation. The more you look, the more you're remembered, and the house never forgets." After Lydia's departure, no one else moved in. The townspeople, shaken by her fate, began speaking of a Merrow family curse. Some believed anyone with the bloodline who entered the house would be consumed. Others said the windows weren't showing reflections, but premonitions, pieces of a future no one wanted to live. Stranger still, fires broke out in the vicinity of Merrow House multiple times in the following years. Trees scorched, fields singed, but the house itself, wooden, exposed and weathered, remained untouched. And through it all, even beneath cloth and nail, the windows never shattered, never cracked, never darkened. They waited. Because reflections do not disappear, they only wait to be seen again. In 1927, the quiet town of Marlow was shaken to its core. James and Alice Turner, siblings aged 9 and 11, went missing while playing near the Merrow House property. Their family lived on the edge of town, and the children had a habit of venturing into the woods after school. That day, they didn't come home. A search party combed the area. Footprints led up to the rusted fence of the estate, where the siblings had reportedly dared each other to peek into the boarded windows. But past that point, there were no tracks, no signs of struggle. Only Alice's scarf, caught on an iron spike, fluttering in the cold wind. In the following weeks, multiple people reported seeing small shadows flitting through the windows, quick movements, as if someone were running just behind the glass. One man swore he saw 2 children staring from the top floor. Their faces were pale, their mouths didn't move. The official report listed the Turners as presumed lost in the wilderness. Their mother never believed it. She returned to the estate every week for years, leaving toys and small notes by the gate. Once, she found one of her son's marbles resting on the path, clean as if freshly placed. After the disappearance, fear eclipsed curiosity. Tourists dwindled. The windows were now symbols of dread, not wonder. Even thrill-seekers hesitated. The town sheriff closed access to the surrounding roads, citing unlawful trespass and psychological harm. By 1930, Merrow House was more ghost than structure, still standing but absent from official records. The estate, overgrown with brambles and moss, faded into memory. Only the windows refused decay. They shimmered through vines and shadow like watchful eyes, always clean, never broken. Then came the Great Depression. With the collapse of the economy, people stopped chasing ghosts. They had real horrors to face. Hunger, loss, displacement. Merrow House became background noise in a world crumbling from within. Even the most imaginative minds had no space left for superstition. For over a decade, the estate remained untouched, but stories still slipped through the cracks. In 1936, a railway worker on night patrol claimed he saw lights moving inside the house. At first, he assumed it was vagrants or looters, but when he approached, the lights vanished. What stayed with him wasn't the silence, but the feeling that someone had followed him all the way back to the tracks. Watching. That same year, 2 teenage boys were caught trying to break into the house. When questioned, they said they had a camera and wanted proof of the ghost children, but one boy confessed something else. He said he'd dreamed of Alice Turner for 3 nights before the attempt. Each night she called to him from behind a glass wall, whispering, "It's not over." They keep playing. He never slept alone again. Then came the Second World War. The world turned its gaze outward, toward battlefields, politics, and survival. In those years, Merrow House faded again, not through neglect, but through global distraction. The town of Marlow fell into silence, its streets quieter, its focus on sons sent overseas and daughters working in factories. But some say the house was not forgotten. During wartime blackouts, a few neighbors reported seeing flickers behind the window curtains, too rhythmic to be coincidence. A single light on, off, on again, as if someone were signaling. No one investigated. By 1945, as the war ended, Merrow House remained as it had for decades, untouched, undisturbed, unbroken, yet somehow still vigilant. What puzzled locals most wasn't just the stories, but the house's condition. Despite decades of storms, neglect, and abandonment, the windows remained flawless, not a crack, not a smear, as if someone or something still lived there, quietly tending to the glass. And in the silence of post-war America, a question began to rise again. If the house was empty, who kept it so pristine? In the spring of 1951, a man named Benjamin Marks arrived in Marlow with a suitcase, a notebook, and a mission. A veteran of the Second World War, he had spent most of his adult life surrounded by ruin, bombed cities, broken homes, lost faces. When the war ended, he didn't return to normalcy. Instead, he turned to the past, seeking answers in places long forgotten. Marks was a self-proclaimed historical preservationist, though few knew his name. What drew him to Merrow House was not its legend, but a single photograph. He had found it tucked in a forgotten file at a Boston library, Agnes Dupont's 1891 plate, the screaming woman in the window. Something about the image haunted him. He tracked the location, studied the reports, read every article, journal, and footnote. Then he bought the property outright. No one in Marlow tried to stop him. In truth, they were relieved. Maybe, they thought, someone could finally close the book on the house. Benjamin moved in quietly, alone. At first, he treated the project like any other historical restoration, cataloguing architectural features, cleaning debris, mapping the structure. He noted how the walls remained solid, the floors surprisingly level, but the windows, as always, were pristine. No dust, no cracks, each one reflecting more than the room behind them. His journals, discovered years later, reveal the shift in tone. The glass has not aged. It reflects more than form, it echoes feeling. Today I stood before the foyer pane and saw myself smiling. I was not smiling. He began to avoid mirrors. He claimed they interfered, muddied the clarity of what the windows wanted to show, and the windows he believed were trying to show something. He described patterns, shifts in light, fleeting shapes, the sense that some reflections belonged to people not present. And then he saw her. On the seventh day, while inspecting the master bedroom, Benjamin saw his mother in the side window, her hair pulled back, wearing the pearl necklace she'd worn on her final day in 1938. She didn't speak. She didn't move. But she watched him with a softness he hadn't seen in over a decade. He fell to his knees. From that point forward, his work stopped. He no longer recorded measurements. His notes grew disjointed, half-sentences, repeated phrases, sketches of window panes with circled faces. He stopped answering letters. Neighbors noticed the lights flickering at odd hours, shadows crossing the drawn curtains. Weeks passed. Then the voices came. Benjamin wrote, "They speak in layers, some behind glass, others within. I no longer know where I stand." He began referring to himself in third person, the one outside, the walker, the echo. He claimed that time inside the house moved differently, that he would wake having missed entire days, uncertain what had been real. He heard footsteps at night, his own, he believed, but coming from the wrong direction. In a final coherent entry, he confessed a growing fear. "The longer I stay, the more I understand. And the more I understand, the less I belong to myself. The glass knows who I was, but I think it's trying to decide who I am." On October 12, 1952, the house went dark. A neighbor, concerned by the absence of light, approached the property and found the front door open. The interior showed no sign of struggle. Dust had begun to settle again, except on the windows, which remained spotless. Benjamin Marks was nowhere to be found. Only a single item remained out of place, his notebook resting on the windowsill of the eastern corridor. The final page read, "There are more of us now." His disappearance made local headlines but faded quickly from the public mind. For Merrow, it was simply confirmation of what they already knew. The house never stopped watching, and for those who looked too long, it never let them go. By 1960, Merrow House had once again faded into the background of Merrow life, a dormant legend kept alive only by whispered warnings and the cautionary stares of older residents. The house remained untouched, its windows still glimmering like eyes behind half-lidded curtains, but to most it had become a ghost of a ghost. That changed on July 8th. A boy named David Renner, just 7 years old, had wandered off during a church picnic on the outskirts of town. While chasing a frog down a wooded path, he came to a clearing and found himself face to face with the estate. The iron fence loomed before him, rusted but intact. He stepped closer, curious, drawn not to the house itself but to something in the window. Later he told his mother that he saw his grandmother, Ruth Renner, standing in the second-floor glass. She was wearing her favorite navy shawl, her hands folded calmly in front of her. The only problem, Ruth had died in 1958, buried hundreds of miles away. David hadn't spoken much of her in the years since, but he was certain it was her. She even smiled. The story would have been dismissed as childhood fantasy if not for what came next. 2 days later, while local authorities were checking the property, more out of formality than concern, they found something strange. A faint, perfectly round smudge appeared on the inside of the same window David had pointed to. It was in the shape of a small handprint. When they cleaned it, it reappeared the next morning. The smudge wasn't dust. It was part of the glass. Word spread quickly. Children began telling stories again. Older folks grew quiet, remembering the disappearances, The whispers, the screams that once echoed through fog. Merrow House, long dormant, had stirred. The panic began with the dogs. In the weeks that followed, several neighborhood pets went missing near the edge of the estate. A collie was found whimpering outside the fence, staring at the house with tail tucked and eyes wide. Another dog was discovered inside the church bell tower, alive but frozen in place as if it had forgotten how to move. Then came the noises. Residents closest to the hill reported hearing rhythmic tapping like fingernails on glass. Sometimes it happened during the day, more often at night. The tapping was soft at first, almost polite. Then it grew louder, faster, more frantic. But when anyone investigated, they found nothing. One evening, a group of teenagers dared each other to approach the house. They returned minutes later, pale and shaken. One boy vomited. Another refused to speak for days. The only thing they said was that the reflections had changed, that they hadn't seen themselves, but the same woman, 5 different times, in 5 different windows, always looking away. Mayor Richard Leary, faced with growing unrest, ordered the perimeter officially restricted. Police posted warnings. A motion was filed to have the house condemned and the windows removed entirely, but the contractors hired refused the job. One left town the next morning. The others claimed their equipment broke the moment they touched the house. And then Benjamin Marks returned. Or rather, his reflection did. A local farmer passing the property at dawn swore he saw a man in the front bay window, tall, bearded, with a notebook in hand. The man raised his free hand and pressed it gently against the glass. That same week, a photographer captured an image from the road. When developed, it clearly showed the face of Benjamin Marks peering from the parlor window, smiling faintly. He hadn't aged a day. The photograph was published in the Merrow Tribune. Panic turned to dread. It became clear the house wasn't sleeping. It was remembering. And for those who had ever entered, even for a moment, it would never forget. In early 1961, Merrow House caught the attention of someone far outside the usual orbit of ghost hunters and folklore writers. Dr. Elaine Crowley, a physicist from Princeton University, had spent most of her career studying light refraction and optical anomalies. Her specialty wasn't the paranormal, it was precision. Her interest began not with a ghost story, but with a question. Why had the windows of Merrow House never degraded? Crowley had read a brief in a scientific digest about the house's peculiar history, mentioning photographs, vanishing owners, and inexplicable preservation. She dismissed most of it as myth, but the reports of pristine glass spanning over a century intrigued her. She visited Merrow in June. Unlike others before her, she was granted temporary access to the grounds by town ordinance under strict supervision. She arrived with a small team, infrared sensors, EMF detectors, thermal cameras, and light spectrum analyzers. For 3 days, they recorded data. What they found didn't match any expected pattern. Even at ambient temperature, the glass emitted a faint localized cold spot, each pane several degrees cooler than the surrounding air, without explanation. No drafts, no chemical treatments. When scanned for radiation or residue, nothing irregular appeared. But when light was passed through the windows at a specific morning angle, the refraction patterns fractured in unnatural ways, suggesting an unknown distortion field just millimeters beneath the surface. Even stranger was the acoustic anomaly. Using a sensitive parabolic mic, Crowley recorded audio reflections from the glass. What should have been echo distortions of ambient noise came back structured, whispers, fragments of melody, words spoken days earlier in completely different locations. Her assistant, Robert Kessler, said it was like the house was recording. Then came the incident with the mirror. On the second night, Kessler noticed that the reflections in his compact mirror didn't align with his movements. He claimed his reflection was delayed, just a fraction of a second, but enough to feel wrong. Crowley dismissed it as fatigue until she tested her own mirror. Her reflection blinked before she did. From that point on, Crowley's tone changed. Her journal, once filled with scientific observation, became riddled with questions. She began speculating that the windows weren't glass at all, but something older. something acting in concert with human emotion, a reactive surface, a sensory medium. In a private memo, she wrote, "We are not observing a haunted house. We are observing an intelligence embedded in architecture, a memory loop, possibly quantum in nature. This place is not cursed. It is conscious." The town, however, was losing patience. Following reports of heightened anxiety among residents and several cases of sleepwalking children found facing their bedroom windows, the mayor ordered Crowley's research halted. Her permit was revoked. Before leaving, she left a sealed envelope with the town clerk containing her full findings and a letter to be opened only if the house was ever breached again. It remains sealed to this day, but whispers of her discoveries couldn't be contained. Word spread through academic circles, drawing attention from fringe physicists and esoteric scholars. Some called her mad. Others praised her as a pioneer. A few even visited Merrow in secret, only to leave shaken and silent. Meanwhile, something else began to change. The windows. Residents noticed the reflections started moving slightly before those passing by, not after, before. A boy ran past on a dare, and the reflection turned its head before he did. A woman hanging laundry across the street dropped her basket when she saw her reflection blink twice, while she hadn't blinked at all. It was as if the house was no longer echoing memories, it was anticipating them. Something inside Merrow House had shifted. Not everyone believed the science, but all agreed on one thing: the house was learning, and it was starting to respond. In the spring of 1962, the legend of Merrow House reached a new threshold. Television had become a dominant force in American life, and with it came a hunger for spectacle. A rising local station in Boston, Channel 4 WBLX, announced a live paranormal investigation. The pitch was simple: a one-hour special called Reflections of Fear Live from Merrow House. It was the first time in history a known haunted location would be broadcast in real time, uncensored. The town of Merrow objected vehemently, but loopholes in jurisdiction allowed the production to proceed, under tight police presence with a promise to stay outside the home. The host was Julian Graves, a charismatic skeptic-turned-showman. His presence lent credibility to the venture, at least at first. He was known for debunking ghost stories and challenging spiritualists. But Merrow House was different. The crew set up on a foggy evening in May, placing floodlights and cameras along the property's edge. 5 windows were targeted, each framed by a separate lens. One camera was dedicated to the parlor window, site of multiple documented apparitions. The broadcast began light-hearted. Graves paced in front of the estate, poking fun at the legends. He interviewed townspeople, read excerpts from old journals, and dismissed the tales as a regional expression of post-war trauma. But as the sun set, things changed. Viewers at home noticed it first. On the parlor window feed there was a faint outline. A man, still, watching. The crew, assuming it was a trick of light, adjusted the camera. The shape didn't move. Then, during a segment near the bay window, Graves paused mid-sentence. He turned slowly to the glass. For a moment he seemed disoriented, then pale. He stepped closer. "Who put that photo in the window?" he asked. But there was no photo, only reflection. The live feed zoomed in. In the glass, standing behind Graves, was a boy, dark hair, vacant eyes, wearing a sailor's uniform. The camera caught him clearly, but when Graves turned around, no one was there. He laughed it off nervously and continued, but the tone had shifted. The audience felt it. Something was watching. Then came the static. For 7 full seconds the feed cut out. Not blackout, just visual disintegration. Shapes and lines fractured the image. When it returned, one of the windows was broken, but only on the screen. On site, it remained intact. Technicians scrambled. Graves tried to calm viewers, joking that even ghosts had technical difficulties. But the humor didn't land, not after what came next. A producer backstage screamed. The crew turned. She pointed at one of the monitors. On it, the camera focused on Graves, but in the window beside him stood another man, older, dressed in outdated clothes. He had Graves's face, but older, paler, mouth sewn shut. Live television caught the moment Julian Graves realized what he was seeing. His face went slack. He whispered, "That's me." The broadcast ended abruptly. Channel 4 claimed technical failure, but rumors spread fast. Staff reportedly refused to re-enter the truck. 3 crew members quit within days. Graves disappeared from public life altogether. When approached months later, he refused to speak of the event. In a private letter later leaked, he wrote, "The house didn't reflect me. It showed what I would become, it warned me." The footage was confiscated. Only fragments remain, blurry stills, brief seconds recorded by viewers at home. But the broadcast was enough. Within weeks, Merrow was overrun by attention. Some came to pray, others to protest, most just wanted to see. The town locked down the property. Fencing was reinforced, signs were posted, no entry, no photos. No filming, but the damage was done. The house had spoken. Not in words, but in image, in reflection, in revelation, and the country had watched. Some laughed, some cried, some swore they saw themselves in the glass. By 1963, the name Merrow House carried weight far beyond the borders of Merrow. It had become a cultural phenomenon, discussed in academic circles, whispered about in high schools, written into books that blurred the line between horror and history, but no one dared enter, until someone did. That summer, a family arrived in town under the veil of secrecy. Their name was Caro. Originally from Oregon, they had a history with the occult, known in niche circles for their beliefs in ancestral communion and spiritual convergence. They believed Merrow House was not a threat, but a bridge, a place where the boundaries between the living and the lost could be crossed and perhaps healed. They bribed a maintenance official to lift the gate lock and moved in overnight with 2 trunks, a baby carriage, and an old phonograph. The townspeople found out within days, but by then, the family had vanished behind the doors. No one saw them come or go. No one knew how many of them were truly inside. At first, the house appeared dormant. No lights, no movement. The windows, as always, gleamed. But soon things changed. Children walking to school began hearing music, old records warbling through static, the tune of a forgotten lullaby. Others reported seeing silhouettes pacing behind the glass, too slow, too deliberate. One boy claimed to see a woman cradling an empty bundle. Another swore he saw himself asleep inside one of the rooms. Then, in October, a local boy named Frankie Holt approached the house on a dare. His friends waited at the road, hiding behind a tree. He never touched the fence, he only stood near it. But when he returned, he was different. He laughed for no reason. He wouldn't answer questions. Later, his mother asked what he'd seen. He said only this: "They were laughing too." She pressed him. Who was laughing? He whispered, "The windows." After that, something shifted. On October 31st, Halloween night, the house went dark, and then flared with light. Every window lit up simultaneously, not with electricity, but with something brighter, whiter. Witnesses described it as sunlight trapped in glass. It lasted for 7 minutes, then silence. When police arrived the next morning, the house was locked. The family was gone. Inside, they found no bodies, no signs of struggle, only a single letter nailed to the main hallway wall. It read, "The house does not keep people. It reflects what they fear, what they love, what they've forgotten. It is not a doorway, it is a mirror, and we stayed too long. We tried to remember." But the glass remembered more. In the attic, hidden beneath loose floorboards, they found something else. A box of letters, old, faded, some in cursive, some printed, all unsigned. Each one spoke to someone long dead, to mothers, to children, to lovers, and at the bottom, a folded note. It bore the initials E.M. Elijah Merrow. It said, "The sea took what I loved, the glass gives it back." But not whole, never whole. The document ended abruptly, no signature, no date. After that, no one attempted to live there again. Over the years, a few dared to approach. Some claimed to hear whispers, others said their reflections lagged behind. But there were no new sightings, no more broadcasts, no brave investigations. The house grew quiet, but never empty. Windows do not sleep. They do not age, they only wait, and those who pass too close swear they can still see someone inside. Not always a stranger. Sometimes someone they miss, someone who's gone, smiling, waiting. And if you look too long, you might realize you're not watching them, they're watching you. Today, Merrow House still stands at the edge of Marlow, quiet, sealed, and untouched. The town has grown around it, though most roads have been redirected. Few speak its name aloud. Most pretend it isn't there. But the legend never faded. In recent years, interest in the house has re-emerged, not through paranormal thrill-seekers, but through a different kind of curiosity. Descendants of those once involved with the estate have begun digging into their family histories, unearthing journals, photos, and letters. And in one such rediscovery came something unexpected: the journals of Dr. Josiah Bell. Passed down secretly through generations, they remained locked in a cedar chest until 1998, when his great-granddaughter, Miriam Bell, a historian at a small liberal arts college, chose to share them with a team of researchers. What they contained reframed everything. Bell's observations went far beyond psychology. He documented not just experiences within the house, but measurable shifts in atmospheric pressure, light interference, and emotional response. He catalogued dozens of accounts in which reflections acted independently from their sources, not just delayed or mirrored, but entirely separate in posture, expression, or presence. One passage stood out. "The window does not reflect what is. It reflects what lingers. Each pane a wound in time stitched with memory." This language caught the attention of Dr. Samuel Heller, a quantum imaging specialist. He requested access to the property under academic pretense and in 2004 received temporary entry. Using modern spectral imaging, his team captured faint figures embedded within the glass, like fingerprints in crystal. Some were identifiable: Elijah, Merrow, Margaret, Benjamin Marks. Others were not. One image showed a woman no one could place, wearing modern clothing, standing with her hand on the glass. The troubling part? Her features matched a woman who had gone missing in the area only weeks before the scan. There was no sign she'd ever been near Merrow House. This prompted a new theory, that the house's windows do not merely store echoes of the past, but somehow intercept the present. Or worse, replicate moments that haven't yet happened. As news of the findings leaked into academic forums, a rift formed. Skeptics called it wishful interpretation, pareidolia, digital manipulation. But others, especially those in interdisciplinary studies, began building a framework they called the trauma echo theory. The idea was radical, that extreme emotion, under the right conditions, could imprint itself not just onto people, but onto the materials around them. That Merrow House, built during a time of personal grief positioned over magnetic deposits, fitted with a rare type of silica glass, had accidentally become a vessel for those emotional residues. If true, it would mean the house wasn't haunted by spirits. It was haunted by memory itself, and memory, unlike the dead, does not rest. In 2012, a quiet effort was made to acquire the house and convert it into a controlled research environment. The town refused. A unanimous vote declared the house a historic hazard and blocked any attempt to interfere with it again. So it stands untouched. And yet the sightings continue. Local hikers have reported lights at dusk, despite no power connection in decades. A group of teenagers in 2019 claimed their friend vanished for 6 minutes near the west side fence. He returned, shaken, unable to speak, his shoes soaked with salt water, despite dry ground all around. The windows remain as clear as ever. No vines, no grime. Every few years, someone captures a photo of the estate, most of them harmless. But occasionally, in the corner of a frame, a shape appears. Not a figure exactly, more like a suggestion. A person in the process of being remembered, and always looking out, waiting for someone to look back. Merrow House remains. That is the simplest truth left after more than a century of speculation, sightings, studies, and silence. The house, untouched by time, sits on its hill above the Atlantic, unclaimed, unbroken, unnervingly still. No one lives there now, no one maintains it, and yet it endures. The paint has peeled, the wood has cracked, but the windows, those infamous panes of impossibly preserved glass, continue to gleam as if polished by unseen hands. Some say the house feeds on attention, that every story told, every eye turned toward it sharpens its memory. Others claim it simply reflects what's already there: grief, fear, longing, the emotional residue that lingers in all of us. But there's a third theory, a quieter one. That Merrow house is not a place of horror, but of remembrance, that it is not cursed but deeply, tragically aware. A relic of pain so profound it burned itself into the very structure of reality. That its windows do not show ghosts but echoes, lost moments, unfinished lives, glimpses of people who are not ready to fade. And perhaps neither are we. Because part of what makes the legend so enduring isn't just the fear, it's the familiarity. Who among us wouldn't give anything to see someone again, to speak a final word, to be remembered by something, anything after we're gone? That's the true power of the house. It doesn't frighten us because it shows monsters. It frightens us because it shows the people we miss, and sometimes the people we might become. If you've ever walked past a window and thought you saw something move behind you, if you've ever stared into glass and felt like you weren't alone, then you understand the smallest part of what Merrow House is. Not a haunted house, but a mirror. And mirrors don't lie, they only reflect, and sometimes they remember more than we wish they did. If this story chilled you to the core, if it made you think, feel, or even look twice at your own reflection, subscribe to the channel. We explore stories like this one, unexplained, emotional, unforgettable, every week. But before you go, there's one more thing to consider. What if the house is still watching? What if even now, as you sit there, a window somewhere remembers you? A moment, a feeling, a look you gave someone who's no longer here. And what if one day someone stands before the glass at Merrow House and sees you? Because that's the thing about forgotten places. They never forget you. Click the video on screen now to explore another eerie legend, one with roots just as deep, and a truth perhaps even more terrifying than this one. Thank you for watching, and remember, some reflections don't fade, they wait.